because let's continue with the panel discussion, where we take a look at how people in the field of education in the UK, France and Belgium implement climate change knowledge, emotion and action in the curriculum. I would like to welcome Paul Turner from the UK. Give him a round of applause. Please have a seat. Florence Rizzo from France. And last but not least, Dries Rombouts from Belgium. It sounds like the beginning of a joke, no? Someone of France, the UK and Belgium. But it's not a joke, of course. We're here to talk about climate education and climate action as well. Paul, after you gave everyone some water, that's very kind of you. I'm going to start with you. Could you just tell a little bit to the audience who you are and what should they know about you as the person representing the Ministry of Eco-Education? It's a cool name, no?
Yeah, thank you so much. The name comes, it's tongue-in-cheek. It's because we think the government aren't doing enough. So we've made our own ministry and we're doing it from the ground up. So my background is I was a secondary geography teacher, and then I've spent the last 3 years now building and bringing together lots of the teaching resources and opportunities already out there for teachers that at the moment are quite fragmented, and we've pulled them together into a place that is much easier for teachers to then weave into their existing curriculum. And we're very much driven by that sense of urgency that we all need to do as much as we can right now, and we do have the autonomy. We've got the ability to do that.
Okay, you bring together 100 resources with just top-notch curriculum material, and through your platform people can use it. Yeah, that's really great. And you work as a teacher yourself?
Yeah, so everyone involved in our project is a teacher, and we think that's really important because we think that brings it an authenticity. It also means that we're sympathetic and understand the actual demands of teachers and the situation that they exist in. And just going back in terms of what we've pulled together, there is a wealth of resources around the world, and I think we've heard already lots of that. Much of the problem is that teachers don't have the time or energy to be able to find it. And whatever we can do to help present it to them in a way that is much easier for them to pull on and draw from, that's exactly what we're trying to do.
Okay, great initiative. And then we have some other great initiative, because Florence, you're from Ecolhuma, a non-profit organization that wants to reduce educational inequalities. And you do that by empowering teachers and school directors as change makers. And why was that necessary here in France?
Yeah, so we started 12 years ago, realizing that teachers in France are 10 times less trained than in other countries. And of course, on new subject like climate change, this is not something that they have been trained on. And so we've done a barometer recently about the perception of teachers, and what they say is that they think that this is their role, and it's exactly the same statistic as we heard about. It's 84% of teachers that think that this is their role, but the issue is that less than 50% has the ability, the knowledge, the feeling that they can do it. So our objective is to reinforce them on their skills, knowledge, to be able to make sure that they can actually train students on that. So we have a platform, a web platform called Be Teacher, Être Prof in French, where we gather 170,000 teachers. And the idea is to have peer-to-peer learning and enable them, empower them to actually tackle new challenges. And one of those challenges, of course, is how to train on climate change and ecological transition.
Okay, and both of you, if I got it right, are there for primary and secondary education. And then we have Dries from Belgium. You work at Artevelde University of Applied Sciences in Ghent, and you're the head of the bachelor's degree journalism and communication. So yeah, people after secondary, we just stop, or apparently you think something else?
No, you don't stop. Absolutely. First of all, I'm very glad to be here and to soak up this energy of change and action. And after the inspiring talk of Koen, this only amounts to more change and action. And I want to really harness that energy to use it in higher education. As a higher education institute, we are, of course, provider of formal learning. But learning, as we know, goes beyond formal learning, formal curricula. We learn every day. A day not learned is a day not lived, I think. And it starts in our schools, it starts in our higher education institutes, but it has to be a lifelong learning project. And that's what we also try to do in our higher education institute. We have a lifelong learning program as well, and we're also the initiator of unique programs such as the climate journalism course, which we started 2 years ago, which is the first one in Belgium, and that's how we try to foster that change and action energy in higher education.
Okay, I see a lot of commitment from the three of you, and that's really great, of course, but in first hand, actually, the Ministry of Eco-Education and Ecolhuma, you're taking over the job. It should be mandatory to have ecological topics in the curriculum already, so luckily there are a lot of engaged people, but why did you initiate it? Was there a lack of climate change education and action?
Yeah, from our part, definitely. And also, so it's not in the curriculum, not in England, in the UK. There are lots of organizations that are lobbying for that and demanding that change, but it takes time. And what we show is that actually there's so much potential within the current system. And we often talk about using the environment as a context, as a lens to be able to explore the world. And rather than teaching maths hypothetically with false situations, we can actually use real world circumstances and data to actually teach, and it makes the learning far more, it's real world learning, it's more meaningful.
Mm-hmm. Even through maths, you can talk about climate change education. Wow, that's a challenge.
Well, weather data. So we can look at rainfall, we can look at temperature, and you can get children analyzing that data. And it gives a bit more meaning to the process of calculating averages if actually they can see it and they experience it firsthand.
And you started relatively small with 1,000 schools, but now you're already reaching way more schools, right?
Yeah, so we were really keen to make sure that we had a proven model, and we worked really closely initially with one school. We then scaled that with 15 schools in the UK that came from very different circumstances to also prove that it was something that would suit any situation, an urban school, a rural school, but also teachers that have different levels of knowledge and understanding themselves. And we looked at the impact, particularly on things like nature connection, as well as then the teacher confidence and the pupils' knowledge and understanding. We also looked at the wider community engagement as well, because something we think is really important is schools as a catalyst for the local community and the impact that they can have. And again, that's been mentioned, on parents, but also the wider society. And yes, we're now very fortunate to have nearly 5,500 schools in the UK who are engaged through this. We work a lot with local governments to make that happen. So we have a very regional model in the UK and work with local governments. But there's 25,000 schools in the UK, so there's still so many more that we need to work with and approach.
All right, but already on a good path, I would say. Yeah. Same for you, Florence. You also offer didactical materials, tools to teachers, but you do not only focus on the teachers, because the school directors also need to be on board, right? That it's not only a few committed people.
Yeah, so sustainable development is in some disciplines in front in the curricula, for example, of biological teachers, but there's lots of disciplines where they are not supposed to speak about this subject. So what we're doing is providing materials for English teachers, music teachers, so all the teachers who are not supposed to speak about that, to include that in their work. And also we are empowering school leaders with ManageEduc, which is a platform to support school leaders on their ability to gather the team around specific topics. And of course, the school in itself can be a huge subject of pedagogy, because we know that it's in France at least really not energy efficient, and so there is a huge renovation plan for schools, but you can learn from scarcity of resources and how to use energy in a different way, how to spare energy. And so the idea is to help school leaders to of course reduce their consumption at the level of the school, but also empower teachers and kids about the understanding they have about those kind of problematic, to make it a whole school approach, because otherwise it's just tackled from different silos, and what we want, of course, is to break silos, silos of the discipline, silos of the role of each person, and to have it as a whole school approach. So it's a big challenge, I think, in the next decade, is to make it interdisciplinary, to embrace the complexity of the subject, and to make it a common goal for all.
Yeah, not just a geography course, but really the whole board, the whole school directors are on board, everyone is playing its role. Yeah, and even if one teacher gets sick, that the project can still go on. Yeah. Okay. Dries, you already mentioned, so you work in higher education. You already mentioned that recently you added the climate journalism as an expert track in the Bachelor of Journalism. Why was that necessary?
Well, first of all, I can count the number of climate journalists in Belgium on one hand, and 3 of them I know in person. Belgium is a small country, but still, that's, you know, there is a need in the field to have journalists that have a specialized knowledge that can do a deep dive into the subject of climate journalism, of climate. And then make those compelling stories, journalistic stories that Koen also mentioned. So that's very important. We need specialists, and that's why we created this specialist course. And it's the first in Belgium, so it was a unique offer. But on the other hand, of course, I agree with everyone that we need to integrate climate literacy, climate change education as a whole in the curriculum. So that's something that we also aspire. But first of all, we need journalists that make the news stories that go beyond the day-to-day news coverage of floods, wildfires, the obvious events that can be linked to climate change. We have to go beyond that, because there are also so many other events in this world that can be linked to climate change. Conflicts, for example, and I think the Syrian civil war was one of the first conflicts that could be linked to climate change. And the same is happening in Ukraine as well. I saw an article on the first years of the war, which coincided with a peak in CO2 emissions in Ukraine because of the military material being used, which is often powered by diesel engines, etc. And so these stories, these not so obvious stories, need to be told by a specialized journalists that know what they're doing, and that they go beyond the understanding, the normal understanding of climate change.
All right. I hear you say it's important that people know about conflicts, and that they also can link less obvious conflicts to climate change, to pollution. But more knowledge does not necessarily lead to action, because we are not as effective as we should be in terms of responding to climate change. So how are you trying to change that? It's a question for each one of you.
I was going to say, the way that Cohen framed it in terms of head, heart, and hand is a really useful way, because I think traditionally schools have focused on the science of climate and relied on very safe bits of knowledge and are reluctant to move to the space of solutions and the broader discussions that we're having in society around what the suitable thing to, how to respond, and we need to involve young people in that. So it's very important that it's framed in schools in that way. And I do also think you're hinting at this, is that sense of framing climate change around maybe climate justice or around ideas of equity and injustice rather than the science, the numbers.
Florence, did you also experience that people, when they know more, that sometimes it not necessarily lead to action?
Yeah, the level of eco-anxiety is strong and is not always leading to action. So what we are doing also with teachers is to empower them on all the soft skills and mental health prevention, because the idea is to reduce stress and anxiety in school, because it can paralyze action. So the idea is to give them tools, also psychological tools, to identify signs of stress and reduce stress, and sometimes also action can help reduce stress, because you feel that you're doing something, you're contributing, so action saves you from being totally nervous about everything. So we are working on that, on this soft skills part of the training.
Okay, it's interesting. I want to do a little poll with the audience. Who suffers from eco-anxiety from time to time? So, that's quite a lot. Okay, so floods, droughts, wildfires. To whom it's really a paralyzing effect? Who really doesn't know what to do anymore and freezes? I see one hand almost freezed. Yeah, okay, 2 hands. All right, so how can we overcome the paralyzing effect? Maybe Dries?
Yeah, well, it's a good thing that people are anxious, but they are ready to take action and change, as you can see. I think we teach our students to be hard on the facts and hopeful on the solutions. In journalism, there's a branch called solutions journalism, which focuses on evidence-based stories. So really go into the science, go into what's going on, and this can be very baffling. This can be very anxiety-stricken, because it's such a big thing, climate change. This is the biggest challenge humankind has ever faced. So it's quite normal to be anxious, and the next step is to go beyond it, maybe after a period of mourning or something, under the loss of biodiversity, for example. But then you have to take the next step and go into action. And solutions journalism is a part of the solution, I might think. So you focus on the solutions, not make them too positive. It's not that every solution is perfect. There's no silver bullet, but you have to weigh the pros and cons and show that there are ways out, and there are ways of policy, there are ways, things that you can do as an individual, as a group. So if you offer that, if you make it tangible, you bring those tangible stories to the audience, I think you can really be a driver for change as a student journalist, as a journalist in the future.
You want to add something to that, Paul?
I was going to say that my experience and the experience lots of the teachers that I work with is actually that apathy is one of the main emotions that young people experience, and it's their disconnect and the way that the structures in society disconnect them from positive action and impact. And then what we often find is we're trying to engage young people in recognizing their ability to have a positive impact, and to nudge them out of the apathy that I think broader society puts them.
Mm-hmm. It's like Koen said in his talk, no, that if we, from the moment we create empathy, that we can see what the other one, what what the effects are for them, then there's a connection and we feel more involved. You wanted to add something?
Yeah, the question is what we teach, but also how we teach it. And teaching about nature and ecology within four walls is not necessarily the best way to do it. So we've done a barometer to ask about how many teachers are actually teaching outside of their classroom, and it's only 20% of teachers doing that, and it's much less in secondary education than in primary education. It's like if you have kids, you're authorizing yourself more to go outside of the school, whereas if you're in high school, you think that it's not professional somehow to be teaching and learning in nature or by nature. So yeah, I just think that we also need to have a mental shift about the learning environment, and that school in itself is not necessarily the best learning environment, of course, to learn about climate change and sustainable development.
Mm-hmm. And you also have some nice examples now from projects that you did with schools and great results. You can share some of them?
Yeah, 12 years ago, we started to impart in France the idea of design for change from Kiran Birseti, and now it's the Learning Planet Institute in Paris of François Tadei that is actually running the program. So they have a higher education program, but now they're also running a program from primary school to high school. And the idea is to have 4 steps, like empathize with the issues, to invent an idea, 3, do it, and 4, share it with others to inspire and give the desire to others to actually do it. And so we scaled this program in France, in primary schools, in vocational schools, and it was really interesting to see the number of projects that the kids were able to invent, reducing paper consumption, taking care about the biological diversity, creating a community garden to actually also redistribute food to people in need in the village. So they have lots of creative ideas, and the fact that there's little is not preventing them from taking action. And so this is, I think, fundamental to learn from an early age that you are not too small to change things. And always when they are for example, calling the mayor saying, we need that, or we want to do that, they have even more strength than an adult, because they're inspiring, I think, adults to take action.
All right, that's really nice to hear. I was also wondering about, so you're doing that on top now. It's something, it's not set in the curriculum. So it's an extra value you add for the schools. Dries, you also mentioned that in your University of Applied Sciences, the expert track, it's not mandatory. Shouldn't it just be part of the curriculum in primary, secondary, and higher education?
Absolutely, it has to be part of the curriculum, and in our institute we also try to do it, but as I said, the expert track is more about specialization. It's about creating those specialists, while that in the basis of our curriculum we also have a lot of attention on climate change, and we do that through the SDG framework. So we're trying to connect the dots in all of our curricula in our higher education institute, and by that way integrate all the learning outcomes necessary to reach the goals on climate literacy. To be at least have the filter on, the glasses on of climate change, and that's something that we want to do, to integrate in all the curricula of our higher education institute. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Who's lobbying? Oh, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say that there's one of the problems is that education is used as a political tool. It's heavily politicized, particularly in the UK. There is a particular approach that is dictated by the government, and it means there is not the space for the kind of conversation and teaching that needs to happen. And so, yes, teachers are trying to carve out the space, but with potential change of government, it may well swing the situation.
All right, you're hoping for another result after the elections.
Maybe.
Okay.
But in France, it is mandatory in some disciplines. It's just not all over disciplines. And I think this subject is a complex subject that needs interdisciplinary approach, which is not in the culture, at least in France. And I think if we're looking forward in terms of what education should be, it should be something that connect a subject one with another to understand the world and act to in this world. And so the way I see it is not just that we put it again in the different silos of math and of science and whatever, but think about this as a complex subject that needs to work in an interdisciplinary approach and embrace the complexity of the subject in that way. And so project-based education is a marvelous way to actually teach climate change.
And suddenly schools sounds way more fun than when I used to go to school. So that would be great. So way more holistic and overarching than not thinking in silos. So in an ideal world, there would it would not be necessary to have very committed non-profit organization like yours to teach even more about climate change and to have extra projects. So if there are some policymakers, educational policymakers here present, what would your call for action be towards them?
I think, at least for France, it would be to have continuous professional development in the law, and that it is a right of 100 hours, which would be 10 times more than what we have already in France. And in that, of course, we can make knowledge be more accurate. We can learn new way of teaching those subjects. And so that would be something that for me would be key if we want to give the tools to educators to be able to be real change makers.
And for you, Paul?
For me, I think it would be giving space in the curriculum, and that might come by removing some of the assessment. Particularly in the UK, we've got a lot of assessment. Children at 16 and then 18 are assessed again. We can remove some of that, and it might give space.
All right. Change Now, it's an event of hope. Dries, what message do you want to give to our audience?
Well, let's put in the right amount of knowledge and skills to get out the most action as possible, I think. And let's make it lifelong learning project, as you already said. We were talking about this as well. It's micro-learning everywhere. We need to create a space and a time in our heads to really focus on climate change and make it a filter through which we perceive education, through which we learn.
Climate change as a filter through which we learn. Thank you for these last words. I want to thank our panel audience, Dries, Rombouts, Florence, Rizzo, and Paul Turners. Please give them a round of applause.